that we have discussed some historical background, and now that we have learned more about the different theoretical ideas of the behavioral therapy, I'm now going to talk some about the major techniques and interventions in behavior therapy. Now, first though, we need to understand a little bit about the therapeutic process in behavioral therapy and the relationship between the therapist and the client to better understand the techniques that are used based upon the client-therapist relationship. Well, now we're going to talk about what is that process between the therapist and the client. Well, there is a significant importance in the relationship between the client and the therapist, as we know throughout the course of this class. The behavior therapist, however, is active and directive in conducting therapy with clients. He or she functions as a problem solver as well as a coping model for and with the client. Although the therapeutic relationship is important in behavior therapy and the behavior therapist does show genuine concern and respect for the client, the therapeutic alliance itself is not sufficient for effective therapy to occur. So, a strong positive therapeutic alliance that is warm, empathetic, kind, genuine, collaborative is still a very essential part for the effectiveness of behavior therapy. The process of behavior therapy is relatively more structured and systematic than many other approaches to therapy. It consists of many stages or steps, which could include conducting a behavioral analysis of the client, or also known as a functional assessment of the client, when the therapist first meets with that client. Also, other methods of assessment could be process recording, a physiological recording, or self-monitoring. It could also have role-playing and other various forms of ways to get to know the client and understand them better for who the person or individual that they are. We could also, as the therapist, obtain a developmental history of the client. The therapist also helps the client set specific goals that they want to reach throughout their sessions together. And it helps them choose effective techniques that are sufficient and effective for that individual. So now that we understand a little bit about the relationship process, there are many techniques and interventions used throughout behavioral therapy, which I have a list right here of the top 11 that are talked about within this section. Number 1 being behavioral assessment, operant conditioning techniques, token economies, social skills training, and assertiveness training, modeling, relaxation training, systematic desensitization, flooding and valvular exposure, self-modification programs and self-directed behavior, multi-modal therapy, mindfulness, and accepted-based cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, those are a lot of therapies to look at and understand, so I am only going to choose about 3 of those to explain further in more detail. And the first one I want to talk about is social skills training and acceptance training. Now, this technique is used to help clients with interpersonal difficulties or deficits in social skills when interacting with other people. It helps them become more effective in whether it is responses, conversations with those around them. For example, providing information about appropriate ways of interacting with others or modeling of such social skills for the client. Reinforcing the client with verbal praise, when they do it effectively or they interact positively with those around them. Giving them feedback can also be used in this case for those who have anger issues, those who have aggressive behavior, or those who simply don't know how to say no to someone, whether it be in a passive way or aggressive way. The second technique I want to focus on is relaxation training. Now, this training is used to help clients suffering from a number of different clinical disorders such as anxiety, stress, insomnia, headaches, other chronic pains such as asthma and eczema and other various illnesses. But this type of technique should be carefully done, and it should be adapted to each individual. It is not one technique that could be the same across the board. So I want you to try this technique with me, and I need you to relax. And typically you would want to start from the bottom up, but given the circumstances, now we're just going to start from the top up. And it is a process of tensing up the muscles and then releasing them. So I want you to take your hands like this and tense them up as hard as you can, and then slowly release all the tension and relax. And count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then it's a process of self-talk, which you are telling yourself to simply relax. Relax. Let's try it again with the muscles in the face and the neck. So everyone, tense up your face and your neck as hard as you can, and then release. And once again, it is a process of self-talk, counting slowly, and a simple process of telling yourself to relax, allow the stress to go, and just start in that process of constant relaxation and releasing those anxieties. Lastly, I want to discuss another technique called systematic desensitization. Which is another core behavior that we see in therapy techniques, and has received a lot of support for its effectiveness in anxiety disorders and specific phobias. It involves pairing a anxiety-provoking stimulus with that usually elicits the anxiety response, which is the competing response. For example, take someone who is scared of a certain type of insect, a certain type of animal, but in this case, we're going to use the example of someone who is afraid of spiders. So, someone who has a phobia of spiders, within this particular technique, what the therapist would do would simply start on an anxiety process, and they would start with simply having the person read the word spider in a book. And after they read the word spider in a book, they would eventually go on to seeing the spider written or saying it, and they would read that word, like for instance if they saw a drawing of a spider in a book. Then they would move on to seeing a small dead spider, or a small dead spider, but then it goes on to a large dead spider, and so on. You get the idea. And eventually it goes on to that person conquering their fear, because it finally reaches the ultimate goal of being able to touch a small or large live spider with their finger. And so, all of the various and many techniques and strategies, these are just 3 ways that you can provide as a behavioral therapist to clients, in providing ways that are specific to that client. One thing we have to remember in techniques and interventions within this type of therapy is that you have to pay attention to the client. You have to understand who they are as an individual and what effective techniques will work for them in accomplishing the goals that you both set forth to achieve throughout your time together.